Genocide by the national speakers for the minorities. First of all, what is Armenian genocide? As previous groups have already explained the genocide, it spanned the years from 1915 to 1918. And in an overview, Turkish leaders called the Triumvirate had taken over the Ottoman Empire, previously known as the sick old man of Europe. They were falling down over their how they had controlled many nations over the years, but they're slowly falling out of control of Europe. And these leaders set out on a plan to get rid of all Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire for competition reasons. They saw them as a threat to their nation, as they wanted to Turkify, as the facts show, as Tyler has explained. And so 1.5 million Armenians died from this tragedy, as the Americans call it now. We cannot call it a genocide yet because this resolution hasn't been officially passed. And there was around 2 million Armenians that were included in this tragedy. Women were rounded up and asphyxiated and marched into the desert, south into the desert, the Barzor, or Garzor, and this was in fear of the Russians being so close during World War I. And it's all kind of an excuse to use it under wraps of a war. You can march them down there and slowly kill them off, not having to use your bullets that you want for war, and for natural causes, even though you want it to happen. Men would be taken from their families and drafted into the army, used for their purpose, then they'd be killed by gunfire. And women were also kidnapped, raped, or sold into slavery if they weren't killed already. So after all this, the facts have proven that this is a genocide. It's just whether the matter of fact that we call it a genocide in the United States. How is America connected to the genocide, the Armenian genocide? America refuses to call it a genocide, as an example of Barack Obama having said that he would call it a genocide when he was running for office 7 years ago, and yet he hasn't called it, and he only has one more chance to do it. Mostly because of the diplomatic relationships with Turkey, we still don't call it a genocide. But yet, that one word is so feared in our relationship with Turkey that we won't use that one word. Just like 100 years ago, the American government still struggles with the balance of moral leadership and political pragmatism. Political pragmatism is pretty much saying that if it works, we don't really care why.
So could you explain what you mean by balance of moral leadership and political pragmatism?
Moral leadership, America being the leader in doing the right thing, showing that they know that it was a genocide, and accepting that they need to take leadership as a country, showing other countries that it needs to be said, the facts need to be set straight. And with political pragmatism, they're saying that we have our relationship with Turkey, and it's working right now, and we don't want to ruin it, even if we don't, and we don't want to threaten it with the fact of calling it a genocide. And that picture is an example of the Incirlik U.S. Air Base in Turkey that we use for all of our connections in the Middle East.
So, now let's focus on America, because is America guilty too? Because if you think about it, America has done genocide as well. We have the Trail of Tears, slavery, and segregation. And the Trail of Tears in 1838 to about 1839. The Americans, led by Andrew Jackson, took the Cherokee Indians and marched them across Oklahoma and Mississippi. And their plan was the Indian removal policy. And the trail was 2,200 miles long and around 4,000 Cherokee Indians died. And then, so, with American slavery, was from about 1619 to about 1865. 12.5 million African Americans were taken from their homeland and shipped over to America and used to either work or be tortured. And it was like in a disgusted manner. And they were also worked to death. So then, the passing of the 13th Amendment wasn't the end though.
And so now we have the Civil Rights Movement after American slavery, where African Americans, the minority, was still being tortured even though they had already endured hundreds of years of torture, and it'd go on for another 100 years, where racial segregation was shown, and even though they had won their freedom from slavery, they had not won their freedom from prejudice. Whites were above the law. They always got away with every atrocity committed upon the blacks, as shown in the murder of Emmett Till. 14 years it took for the lives and the lives of many leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. to convince the great but blinded nation we live in today, the African minority, for us to grant the African minority the equal rights everyone deserves, no matter your race, religion, and so on. They had to suffer through this time of severe racism, as shown in protests of the rally, that they were getting, they had firefighters that were shooting water at them, and they also had dogs that would attack the protesters when they were trying to gain the freedom from the prejudice that they deserved. And many of these actions were from certain states, mainly down south, and just certain people. But America let this happen, and it should be held accountable for repaying the wrongdoing that they let their states commit upon this certain minority. Now don't be a hypocrite now, because Wyoming, the United States, has committed many atrocities upon their own people, white. Now why can we go and tell the Turkish people that they have committed atrocity and it should be called a genocide, when we can't tell ourselves and tell the people that we have committed atrocities on that we're sorry and that it was wrong for us to do so? We're the man holding the pro-life sign saying that we can fully say that it's a genocide. The Armenian Genocide is a genocide. It's not tragedy, but we're saying that we haven't committed anything ourselves. We haven't tortured blacks in slavery. We haven't had segregation problems, and we haven't tortured the Native Americans, making them go on the Trail of Tears that would lead them to somewhat of a genocide themselves, killing them on almost a death march, the same as they did with the Turkish people did with the Armenians. Thank you. That's a website.
So can you explain at the bottom when they go to vote what exactly you're asking them to do and why?
So yes.
Okay. We want you to vote yes, but that's only if we can also pass a law that the United States needs to recognize what we as a nation have committed upon the minorities that live in our country, including the Trail of Tears and the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, recognizing that what we have done with slavery and with civil rights is wrong. But if none of this can happen, we can't go and tell the Turkish people that what they did was a genocide, and if we can't accept what we have done as fault with our country.
So just to make it clear on your instructions there at the very bottom, there's two things where you put an X. The first question says your vote on the proposed amendment. If you haven't gone through the legislative process, some of you have been doing that the last 2 days, and that was pretty fun. Can you take a bill or a resolution that says what Turkey did is genocide and add something, tag it on the end? So that's called an amendment, and tell us one more time, what do you want to tag on the end of that?
So we want to add the amendment of acknowledging that we have tortured our own minorities in the country, including with the Trail of Tears, slavery, and the civil rights, within the civil rights movement.
So if you agree with that statement, that's the amendment, you say yes. If you disagree with that statement, you say no. Because they kind of want to propose that amendment on the end of this, that what the United States has done in those two instances is genocide in their opinion. Now, however you vote on that, independent of that, the next one says, on the resolution itself, calling what Turkey did genocide 100 years ago. Yes or no. So just so you're clear on the votes, now, before you fill those out, questions for these gentlemen. I have a question. I am not good at math, especially without my smartphone, and I didn't have it in my pocket, so I could be a little bit off. But based on the statistics you gave, you said that slavery went from 1619 to 1865, is that correct? Okay. As the person who's entrusted with teaching American history, the United States did not exist at its earliest until 1776. So I did a little bit of math. You gave us a span of 246 years you said slavery was going on. If you look at that time span, for the first 157 years of that, there was no United States. There was a British colony. And only the last 89 years of that time span that you gave did the United States actually exist. And during that time period, not nearly as many new slaves were brought in from Africa as the first 150 or 160 years.
But we still supported it, though. We still kept it going for those 89 years. We didn't stop it when the United States was first brought about.
And you think that those events meet the standard of genocide that we've all talked about? This?
It's not genocide. It's more of a atrocity committed upon a minority. But the Trail of Tears is more of an example of genocide. Yeah.
So, just to get a clear understanding of what you want, do we not already call it the American genocide of the Native Americans? Is that not
Well,
already?
we don't call it a genocide. We just call it the Trail of Tears. We haven't accepted what we have done.
So we haven't labeled it yet?
We haven't covered up as much as the Holocaust. They tried covering up for the years. They were almost ashamed of what they had done. They erased it from learning about it in school. Same with Armenian Genocide. They tried erasing it and putting it under wraps of a world war.
But we haven't done it.
Not as much. We still learn about it, but we just haven't given it a name.
Because how does a country officially call something genocide?
It has to be passed through a
Resolution of Congress, right? That hasn't happened.
but it will be upon this resolution with the amendment that we have added on.
And keep in mind who our president is right now. Yes. Does anyone else have a question for this last group?
One more, same sort of question that I asked before, what would be the consequence of America calling what we've done genocide officially?
Of course, many, the minorities that have been involved would greatly be, they'd be pleased, and after a long time suffering, you want the people to eventually admit to what they have done. It's almost, in a sense, it's not revenge, but you're satisfied with being apologize to. Now, in a sense, but the people that are apologizing, it'd also be a great low in the country, having to accept what you have already done instead of covering up like many countries have done and not accepting like the Turkish government and the Armenian Genocide.
Does anyone else have a question for them? Does anyone else have a question for anybody before you vote and fill out the bottom part? If you do, you can raise your hand or go tap them on the shoulder. But if you don't, then go ahead and fill out that bottom part. And make sure you answer those 3 questions. They're all gonna read these when we're done.